How do generations get their names? We all know what a millennial is. There are stereotypes about what millennials do and do not like, how lazy they may or may not be, and how often they check their social media feeds, all because we're comfortable using this single term to refer to an entire age demographic of the population. Millennial is a powerful word, and not because of the age range it refers to, but because of just how useful it is, just like Gen X or Baby Boomer. If you're enjoying these surprising stories about generations, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. There's plenty more to discover. There is no single or even typical way that generations historically get their names, because lumping everyone who's roughly the same age together is a relatively new phenomenon. The Lost Generation, born between 1883 and 1900, came of age during World War I and is often associated with disillusionment and literary innovation. The Greatest Generation, born from 1901 to 1927, lived through the Great Depression and fought in World War II, earning their name through resilience and sacrifice. The Silent Generation, born between 1928 and 1945, grew up during wartime and post-war austerity, known for their discipline, modesty, and civic-mindedness. Baby Boomers, born from 1946 to 1964, were shaped by post-war prosperity, the civil rights movement, and cultural revolutions, becoming one of the most influential generations in modern history. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, came of age amid shifting societal norms, economic uncertainty, and the rise of digital technology, often seen as independent and pragmatic. Millennials, born from 1981 to 1996, are the first generation to grow up with the internet, marked by their tech savviness, social consciousness, and adaptability in a rapidly changing world. Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2012, are digital natives who value diversity, inclusivity, and innovation, having grown up in an era of smartphones and social media. Generation Alpha, born from the early 2010s through 2025, is the youngest cohort, growing up in a hyper-connected AI-driven world that will shape their learning, communication, and identity in unprecedented ways. When did we start naming the generations? Some social historians link it to Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. The book's epigraph quotes Gertrude Stein saying, "You are all a lost generation." She may not have originated the phrase though. More solidly, in 1951 Time ran an article saying today's younger generation does not make manifestos, make speeches, or carry posters. It has been called the silent generation. While silent generation was popular in the 1950s to describe the teenage or young adult crowd born in the early 20s to early 30s, it's now generally 1928 to 1945. So, how did baby boomers get their name? Well, next were the baby boomers. It all started for them when the Census Bureau began referring to the years after World War II, now that's 1946 to 1964, as being a post-war baby boom, since births skyrocketed from around 3 million a year to over 4 million a year. As the kids born in this boom started to grow into adults and, consumers, ad agencies found traction by marketing their products to these so-called baby boomers. This would actually be the first, and so far the last time a generation's official name would come from a government organization. So, how did Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z get named? Well, eventually the baby boomers got older and, became less appealing to companies with something to sell. The ad agencies, always eager for a new target, wanted another catch-all term for the fresh members of their favorite age group, and honestly, they just started shopping around different terms. To do this, they throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, Peter Frances, a demographic and consumer markets expert, told Mental Floss in 2018. And in some of the meetings, they don't stick. That's how Generation Y, a proto-term for millennials, went in and out of fashion. Generation Y was too difficult to say, too hard to brand. It didn't have the cachet, it didn't have the spark of millennials, Frances said. Not sticking is really a matter of whether or not media organizations start using the term. And not just any media organization. I'm talking about the Associated Press or Reuters. People who are syndicated that produce lots and lots of editorial content that they send out to various organizations, Frances said. As for determining the dates for millennials, it all came down to demographics and, well, the old adage of comparing apples to apples. In 2010, which is when they did the census, baby boomers were all 45 to 64 years old, Frances explained. Now, in order to compare millennials to the baby boomers because they're the next boom, you have to have what? 20 years. And so in 2010, millennials are people between 15 and 34, and then they work back from there to figure out when they were born. If it seems like we're skipping over a generation, that's because we are. And honestly, for the most part, ad agencies did too. Back in 1991, Douglas Coupland wrote his book, Generation X Tales for an Accelerated Culture, about the anonymity he and his contemporaries felt growing up in the shadow of the baby boomers. They were products of a 10 to 12-year downturn in birth rates, sandwiched between the boomers and the millennials. And although the term stuck with the general population, the generation was just the wrong size to matter much to marketers. It seems unlikely ad agencies will take such a passive approach again. The ad agencies have a mission and an imperative to bring to their clients news of what's going on in the marketplace, Frances said, and so, inevitably they segment the American populations into various groups. The necessity to do that means that they sit around and they come up with names. Gen Z, next in line after the millennials, has now acquired consumer value and will, become more powerful in the coming years. As that happens, ad agencies will have a perfectly workshopped label ready to slap on spending reports and style section columns. And once Gen Z has aged out of the marketing sweet spot, Gen Alpha will rise up to start taking their place.